IGF USA event. I'm really excited to have everyone here. My name is Jeremy Bernick, and I'm one of the organizers for today's event. We are so excited to have you all here and can't wait to learn alongside all of you today. For those unfamiliar, internet governance is an all hands on deck global effort to keep the internet intact. The Youth IGF USA is partially inspired by all the other incredible youth organizers and organizations in this space, like the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance and ISOC's Youth Special Interest Group, who have paved the way for youth organizing in this space. We hope this event inspires other national and regional IGFs to build out their youth events to center new voices in these timely conversations. Many new internet users are aware of the deeply difficult conversations, working groups, and legislations it takes to keep the internet going. We hope that the Youth IGF USA event provides a brief glimpse into that very complicated world. We want to also thank our organizing team and the IGF USA team, especially Dustin Loop and Melinda Clem, for their ongoing support. Going forward, we have an amazing day of sessions lined up with leaders from different major stakeholder groups, including academia, civil society, the telecommunications and internet industry, and the US government. We hope that today is an eye-opening experience for some and a comfortable refresher for others. This event will be a pre-event for the broader full-day IGF USA tomorrow. On that note, we want to officially begin the Youth IGF USA, and we will now have Dustin Loop to tell us more about tomorrow's IGF USA festivities.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy, and also thank you, Meri and McKenna, for all of your work pulling this together. It's really great to see a youth-led initiative happening within the IGF USA ecosystem, and look forward to this being an exciting first step in a movement moving forward. And like Jeremy alluded to, tomorrow we'll be having the IGF USA annual event that we have had pretty much every year since 2009, with one little blip there in the middle. But there's really exciting set of topics that we're going to discuss tomorrow. A lot of the critical issues facing the internet, and we're bringing together a wide range of diverse multi-stakeholder speakers to develop this dialogue in a way that is uniquely IGF and uniquely IGF USA, to provide a unique perspective for where these conversations go and how they develop in the broader ecosystem. And so we'll kick off tomorrow with a fireside chat with NTIA Administrator and Assistant Secretary of NTIA, Alan Davidson. We'll touch on issues related to broadband and digital equity, cybersecurity, and internet fragmentation, and get his thoughts and some insight into how the NTIA is approaching those issues. From there, we'll have a couple of main plenary sessions that'll bring together the entire IGF USA audience to focus on content moderation, and really looking at that through the lens of the different proposed solutions and policy lens there. And then we'll also look at the trust and safety side of these platforms through the lens of how to handle some of these complex issues with respect to encrypted platforms, and specifically end-to-end encrypted platforms and messaging services. And then we'll break out for a little bit and have a nice lunch. And then from there, we will move into our afternoon breakout sessions, where we get a little bit more in the weeds on some of these various topics. So we'll discuss IoT and security related to critical infrastructure, talk about the the emerging world of digital identity and the role that identity attributes play in that conversation. And then we'll simultaneously have a third session looking forward, talking about our visions for the future and what to expect from emerging technology. And then we'll move into our second set of breakouts from there, talking about the future of online markets through a lens of competition and antitrust. And then simultaneously, we'll be having a conversation around broadband access and digital equity, and looking through the local lens to figure out how we best reconcile the disconnects between large federal programs and local needs. And then in line with that and in parallel to that will be a discussion around the unintended consequences of GDPR and looking at what some recent developments have meant for third-party cookies and what that means for the overall ecosystem. And then we will round out the day with a really exciting conversation that kind of weaves most of these things together, talking about the net breakup or internet fragmentation, as well as a number of other fun names like the splinter net that people like to use to describe this circumstance, but really talking about it through the different lenses. And I think you might hear a little bit more about that when you hear from my colleague and fellow co-chair Melinda Clem in just a little bit. So it is a hybrid environment. So whether you can attend in person or virtually, please do come ready to actively participate. And whether that's joining the conversations in the room or the online chat room, we want to hear from you and want to bring your questions to the speakers to contribute to a better conversation and a better program overall. So happy to see you all tomorrow, and I'll hand it back to the Youth IGF USA organizers.
Thank you so much, Dustin. We're indeed excited for this inaugural Youth IGF event, as well as the great program at the IGF USA tomorrow. And I also want to thank you very much for all your support for our initiative. So without further ado, I would love to introduce two members of IGF USA community, Melinda Clem and Nick Merrill. Melinda is an experienced leader in internet infrastructure and technology markets with expertise in corporate development, strategy, and marketing. And Dr. Nick Merrill is a research fellow at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, where he directs the Daylight Lab. This part of our session will be an exchange of ideas between two, I would say, veterans of the internet governance community. And to kick us off, I would love to start with the broad question, which is, what does internet governance mean to you? And Melinda and Nick, whoever wants to jump in first, take it away.
I love defining things. I define internet governance as the heterogeneous ordering process of the internet, and I stole this from Hoffman et al. But the idea behind this definition is that everything that we do to interact with the internet is internet governance. The question is really scale and domain and scope, right? But when you spin up a server, you're partaking in internet governance. And when you're, Google or Cloudflare deciding how traffic flows across the entire internet, you're also partaking in internet governance. And all of this activity orders the internet. And I find this to be an empowering definition.
Thanks, Nick. Since we've gotten a more textbook example of the definition, let me give you one that's a little bit more emotional. For me, internet governance is about a journey that we're all on together, regardless of our path and our goal. Our immediate goals, our long-term goal is a safe, secure, and accessible internet. So for me, it's about all the various paths that we take to get there, the conversations, the research, the best practices and norms that are created, and sharing of voices. So for me, it's really about a journey.
Awesome. Those are great answers, guys. I just want to remind the audience as well that feel free to ask questions in the chat towards the end. We'll have a Q&A after the session. I wanted to ask you both, which actors do you think actually really govern the internet? I know we talk a lot about stakeholders, there's various domains, but which ones are really in the weeds doing the internet governance work? And do you think these are still the most effective actors to steer this kind of unique public good that is the kind of internet governance world?
I'll jump in. So this is a question that I'm often trying to explain when I explain to people over the last 2 decades, what do you do? And, you know, I'm often, more often than not, people say, well, isn't there somebody who manages that? Isn't there somebody, you know, oversight? And isn't there somebody watching this? And they're often very surprised when the answer is no. That unlike other verticals, other sectors of the market, right? The pharmaceutical industry that has the FDA very carefully monitoring, you know, sort of every stage of a drug development and its launch, and then, you know, measuring efficacy and having these very quantitative measurements. You know, you can see that in transportation and cars, you can see it in the FAA and airline travel. The internet really doesn't have those sorts of equivalents. The closest is at the very base layer. If you think of the internet as a stack from, you know, the nuts and bolts and bits and bytes behind it, at the infrastructure layer and the comms layer up to the applications that most people see, you really only have oversight and, you know, something bordering what you would call regulation at the infrastructure layer. And that's with ICANN, an acronym for the Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers. And they're specifically limited to looking at domain name registrations and top level domains. So the IGF USA being the domain name in the top level, in this case is CC, TLD, the .us. So that's their remit, and it's limited there. Otherwise, these are businesses and organizations that are governed by their national law, wherever it is that they're incorporated or doing business. Those are the rules that govern.
Yeah, I think figuring out who runs or provisions the internet is really an exercise in squinting, like zooming, you know, way far out and squinting. And I find that when I do that, the answer that I come to is that Americans run the internet. The primary drivers of the internet that most people experience are US-based corporations. And many of the, I don't want to say all, but certainly historically and still today, many of the nonprofit bodies that govern the internet at the infrastructure protocol layer are dominated by Americans and often by American interests. There's a separate question of whether this is an effective or the right one that I think you asked, Jeremy. And of course, effective is relative to whoever's goals you might, you know, whatever kind of goals might be relevant. Is the internet effective in furthering US interests is a deep and complex question of its own. And then the separate and orthogonal question, is that a good thing for the internet to do? Is of course, maybe in some ways a simpler question, but also a rich and complex one, because it begs the question, what is the right? And what does it mean for an internet to be effective? What goals are the right goals normatively for the internet to achieve? And to me, those are the really interesting questions.
Thank you so much. I think a question that flows from what Nick just said is, how do we keep the internet global, but still try to make it effective for everyone? Because once you try to have something on a global scale, you come up with different issues, such as different local applications of technologies and how different things are perceived, and the big issue of the internet being a Western innovation and experiment and all of this. So I think another big question that we would love for you to reflect on is, how do you see the process of keeping things global and having more collaboration versus having more fragmentation around the regulation and like having things governed on the internet more locally?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess we're trading off kind of cadence here. I have a strong and often I find very controversial opinion about fragmentation. And I would like to preface it briefly by saying that fragmentation is not unidirectional. It is not a single spectrum that we move on from less to more fragmentation. There are many ways of thinking about fragmentation, and one very simple way is who has access to the internet. There are now people who are connected to the internet, not connected to the internet. So if you think about it that way, fragmentation has improved iteratively over time. More people have gotten connected to the internet, and that decreases that kind of connected, not connected binary fragmentation. And then there are many other kinds of fragmentation that I think people who think about internet governance tend to really focus on. Things like, domain names, global naming system. Are we moving toward multiple fragmented naming systems like ENS or Handshake, to complement the DNS service? And will this cause naming collisions? These are important questions. They're not the only questions in fragmentation, and they have to be weighed against other normative goals. So again, the question becomes, who is the internet for and what is the internet for? And how does it achieve those goals? And how can we preserve, a global communication system without necessarily compromising on our values, or at least doing so selectively? And although the internet appears to be a global infrastructure, there has never been one global internet. The internet has never been this completely uniform global thing, or at least as long as it has been global, as long as it has been international, it has not been uniform. So the question is always, how do we do this process of negotiation between local needs and also, local needs for global communication, which is at the end of the day a local need as well. That's a question that I think no current internet governance body focuses on the way I would like to see it focused on. And there's no great way of making those sorts of decisions. And I think part of the issue is that the discussions about fragmentation tend to fixate on things that are important, but are not the only important things.
I'm going to touch on 2 points that Nick made. First and foremost is that fragmentation does exist, right? It's out there. And though we talk about it with a negative connotation, we do have to realize that some of the fragmentation that happens is to be respectful of local needs, right? That whether it's, the European Union, a smaller country, they will have specific needs that they want to prioritize for their citizens and for their businesses. And they're going to institute laws that they want to prioritize. For example, in privacy, we have the GDPR that's been in effect now for five years. And it's, that is an example of what I would call a local version of fragmentation, because then it does create differences in how we all reply throughout the world. So that's the first point. The second one was the point about connectivity. So the best way we can limit, let's call it the harmful versions of fragmentation, is to keep the internet connected, to keep a free flow of information, and to limit any sort of barriers, be it, structural and physical, saying we're not going to give you access to any sort of content. We're going to shut off entire websites or ban certain apps, things of that nature, or limit, more specific types of content. So that's one way to keep it open and to avoid the harmful fragmentation.
Thank you for those thoughtful responses. I just wanted to pivot a little bit because I'm kind of interested in maybe breaking down the word internet governance. I know in these conversations, we tend to think a lot about the technical sides of what the internet is, but there's a very political definition involved in the act of governance. And one of these ways in which it manifests is understanding our multi-stakeholder model. And for those not familiar, the multi-stakeholder model is how a lot of the operating bodies in internet governance deliberate and assign agency to different groups. I'm curious if you both think that to address issues of fragmentation, connectivity, and all the other things that do arise in these conversations, are we looking at the right form of governance structure? Are we looking at the right political bodies and apparatuses? Or are there opportunities to expand or democratize those to better involve different parties like young people in these conversations?
I would say there's tremendous room for improvement. I want to call on some of the words that Dustin used when he introduced what the program and how we put together IGF USA. A key point, as you said, is multi-stakeholder. And that is something that is it's one of several words that can be very, very hollow unless you are actively practicing it on a daily basis, right? And it's something that we do, and it can be difficult, right? Because it requires you to actively get new voices. Otherwise, you're going to be the same group of people every meeting, rehashing the same ideas. That doesn't work. It's not a matter of it doesn't work for the internet. Guys, it doesn't work anywhere, all right? Go look at any case study of a corporation and they will tell you diversity of inputs, diversity of backgrounds leads to success, right? So that let's take that as sort of a global fact. And so we need to do a better job of getting a diverse set of voices, because it's only when we get those voices that we can learn, that we get the different perspectives, we know the goals that you have, the challenges, and we can then all share those. And from there, that's the point where we should start defining solutions, whether whatever form that solution takes. But before you can do that, there is an information gathering step that's necessary, and that is the critical component on that is having enough voices. That includes cat voices. This is everybody. This is Nola. She's our feline mascot for IGF USA.
I agree with Melinda. Are the institutions we have the right ones? No, of course not. And I have a vision that I would like to share, which is that municipalities, localities, towns produce their own internets, local internets that can serve as a scaffolding for local democracy and can in turn, delegate authority to, the members of those communities to manage those local internets, and that those local internets can interoperate selectively with one another and with this internet that we're talking on today. I believe that is a route to a more democratic internet, and I believe that it is a route to more robust local democracy as well. And I think that these things can very much go hand in hand.
Thank you so much. I think a related question is, let's assume you have a magic wand, and how would you structure the internet governance to better balance these local needs and also, as we were saying, keep communications global, especially as Nick mentioned already, nobody is actually doing this or not doing this well enough. So I would love to hear if you have more insights into this.
Well, I shared my vision. So I would say if I could wave a magic wand, I would do a lot of things beyond the internet. I think that robust local democracy is something that I strongly believe in. I think that municipalities, localities are the home of democracy and always have been. They're the forefront of what I might call direct or deliberative democracy. That is where my attention is. And my question is, how can the internet, really structure, scaffold, and support those democratic institutions? I think that inserting democracy into the internet is getting the cart before the horse a bit. Before we have robust democratic institutions that can actually do anything, let alone manage an internet, something complex like that. So, my orientation is much more on how can we create and structure, democracies that work, democracies that deliberate, democracy when the people are thinking, as Fishkin would say, and then apply those to an internet. And of course, democracy is on one hand always local, but on the other hand can actually scale quite well. And I do expect that those robust local democracies would be able to coordinate on a global scale. It may not result in an internet that the whole world shares, but it can result in an internet that many of these democracies share. And it can result in an internet that can interoperate selectively with some other internets, even ones that may not share 100% of our values.
Nick, I love the use of democracy here. And I'm going to play on that because I think it really gets to the heart of this problem of who has the voices. And you never want to be in a position where it's only the loudest voices that are being responded to. Because often what happens there is it's not just about, structurally my vocal cords, can I be loud? A lot of times it comes with money, right? It's who has the money to fund the people to participate, to engage in these activities. And you never want that sort of a situation. So I think Nick's onto something really interesting here where, maybe we need to take an approach that gets a little more prescriptive and say, we need a minimum set of participation to move forward, right? It's a difference of, in the United States, election participation is voluntary, right? Whereas, if you look at Australia, it's mandatory, right? Like we really want to get everybody's voice. So we require people to vote. So, what I would like to see is, a more deliberate effort to say, we're going to have these voices and then we move forward. Then we have enough information because we don't have enough information if it's only the 3 largest companies at the service layer that are participating. How do we get the small businesses? How do we get, any other type of organization that's not there so that they have a say in a really constructive manner? Because you don't want a situation where small and medium-sized businesses or community groups, academics really don't get a say.
Thank you for that, Melinda. I really like looking at this in an optimistic way and almost prognosticating about what a better future would look like. I think that's what I appreciate about both of you is when we talk about the internet today, there are oftentimes so much negative things that we can look at, but there are alternatives and there are structures that can be built to watch out for. And hopefully the young voices here that see this take that into mind. On that note, I wanted to transition as well to thinking a bit more in detail about like what issues do you see in internet governance that you want to work on? What problems are the most concrete for the next decade that scare you both as veterans in this industry and space?
So I'll jump in, but I'll warn you, my answer is going to be a little bit lengthy because I don't like to talk about problems without talking about solutions. So pardon me if I get a little Professor Clem here on you. Folks that know me are familiar with, over the past 10 years or so, my beating a drum about cybersecurity. And it's because of the ubiquity of the problem and that it's not just something for businesses and hospitals or whomever that, you hear are getting attacked. It's something that faces individuals. There's, any number of scams out there that harm individuals. And I've changed my tune in the last 3 years. Cybersecurity, as huge of a problem as it is, and, it's quantifiable. My focus now wants to be on mis and disinformation because the problems move beyond a national security threat, a financial impact, with ransomware or anything like that. We do have these existential threats to democracy. We do have real threats to public health. We are seeing this as a direct result of mis and disinformation. And these are things that will have long-term ramifications for the planet, right? I mean, in case anybody missed the news, right? It's been 117 degrees in Spain and over 104 outside of London, right? Part of our, the world's collective lack of response is misinformation about what is what is the scope of the problem, right? We've seen, people needlessly sick refusing medical help or seeking out harmful medical help during COVID and the rise of misinformation there. So it's something that I think for me, it has leapfrogged cybersecurity, just because we do see, physical harm to people, whether it's what happened here at the Capitol on January 6th and people dying and hurting and the hate and the violence, that to me needs to be amended. So on the solution side of that, as you heard in my introduction, I'm a strategist, I'm a business person. And, to me, the most relevant case study here and what I want to see happen is, I don't know if you're familiar with the net positive movement. This is something that folks have done, to address sustainability and climate. And Unilever, the big brand product person, right? Companies really done a great job leading on this. And they said, in its foundation, what it says is incremental change isn't enough. It's not going to work. We're not going to have a planet that's habitable if we keep taking these really small little steps. We need to fundamentally change business models, change production, distribution, all of it. We have to be bold. We have to be audacious. And that comes at a cost, right? You have to say, hey, shareholders, I'm not going to be beholden to my quarterly numbers anymore, because we've got this long-term vision and we've got the world as a stakeholder. And I need that sort of big, audacious moment to happen with dis and misinformation, because we have to just structurally say these incremental responses we're doing, which are really just takedowns, totally after the fact, isn't working. There's way too many problems out there and they're leading to direct harm. So I want to see a big, audacious change. But at the same time, I needed to be principled, right? I'm a class of people here in the United States who just lost some rights, and I don't want to lose any more, particularly the First Amendment. So we have to go about this in a principled and uniform and transparent way, but somebody has to go do something big. And I will tell you, if Twitter is about to come into 10, potentially 12-figure settlement, boy, I'd love for them to go private and go do this. Take that money and just fix, change, alter, and give us a whole new way of doing it.
Yeah, I largely agree with Melinda. I believe that the problems that face the internet, such as they are, downstream of our political problems. I believe that our political system is the cause primarily of the problems that we see on the internet. The problems that we see on the internet are the result of the United States, whose deference to private enterprise has created corporations that now compete with power for the state that minted and fostered them. And disinformation, misinformation, threats to these, rights that supposedly are enshrined in the Constitution, and for certain groups have been enshrined in the Constitution, at least for some time. This is the natural consequence. We made our bed and we're sleeping in it. The solutions to our problems on the internet will come from changes to the way that we do politics. I do not think that reform is a reasonable or effective solution. I don't think that approaching these political systems and expecting them to change via the tools that those systems provide is a practical tool. I believe that the most practical tool for change is creating new democratic institutions to replace the old ones, and doing so at the local level is the most practical way of doing that. That is why I believe that local democracies that build local internets are the best way forward. I believe that we can create internets in municipalities. I believe that they do not have to overlap strictly with this internet. I think they can do so on their own terms. I think that they can scaffold those local democracies. And, for people who believe that these kind of local democracies can happen somehow without the internet, I do not believe that they can. I don't believe that any new political system will survive without a network that supports its goals. And I think that an internet will support those goals, but not this internet.
I largely agree with both of you on that. And I think these are good points. I'm curious about maybe digging a little bit deeper into that. The internet's infected by the culture of our own political regime and choices. Do you think that's largely a reflection of the US's political apparatus, structure, donor class, or do you think it's something that's expanded into something even more nefarious, that it's a global government issue, and it's an issue of the current multilateral system that's causing the internet to decay and to rot a bit at the seams.
Yeah, listen, I think it's always very tricky to take some very complex and multimodal problem and identify causes for it, because really these causes are, even if you could identify any one cause, it's often a bidirectional causal relationship where the thing that you're, supposedly the effect is actually exacerbating the cause and so on. I do think that I can make the claim that there's no great system of global governance. I think that the most obvious evidence for this is an ongoing climate crisis that has not been effectively abated. If there were a good global governance process, we would not be facing a climate crisis. And I think that coheres to some kind of, definition of reasonable kind of, counterfactual argumentation. I don't know that, we can expect to solve this problem as an internet governance community. I do think that internet governance communities can help structure alternative systems for reasonable governance using internets. And I think that that's a very powerful thing for young people to do, especially young people who are interested in activism. And I think that it can really work synergistically with other kinds of activist projects and tendencies. And I think that that's a very valuable thing to do.
Melinda, any thoughts about that from Nick?
Yeah, I agree. I get very frustrated when people paint a broad brush and just want to say, well, it's all these American companies that are at fault here, because that's just way too reductive. By and large, these companies are existing and trying to do good things. This isn't, out of, an Austin Powers sort of like Mr. Dr. Evil or whatever. That's not their goal. There are unintended consequences and things that happen, and things have gotten out of hand for certain companies, for sure. But I don't like, I think it's very reductive just to say, oh, it's their fault. I don't think it's any one fault. I think it's something that, it's very difficult to balance a structure that is equal parts innovative, but also safe and secure and accessible, right? I think if there's any dominant American position, I would say that it would stem from the way we look at competitiveness and antitrust, and we measure it from the measurement typically has to do with harm. And I think that's a little backwards. I'd rather, say that seems like a very low bar to me. Maybe we really do need to talk about safety and well-being being the bar, not harm. Right? But again, that's one piece of it. It's certainly not, the reason we don't have a strong governance structure today.
Thank you so much for your insights. I really love Melinda's the main points, the main issues that are threatening in internet and our societies today, and also points before about multi-stakeholder models not being fully realized in practice. And I also fully agree with Nick about making better use of local democracies and maybe strengthening them further. And Nick already alluded to a question that we are really keen to hear your opinions on, which is about youth involvement in these processes. As the generation that has been born with internet and is the one who will carry on this fight, we are really curious to hear, how do you see the role of youth in the internet governance, and how do you think we can make the participation more meaningful? And what I mean by this is just to go beyond simply saying that we need more people involved, to actually have the voices heard and be at the decision-making tables. Why not?
I'm going to give you a visual. Give me 1 second. I have this bag. I carry it a lot. You can see what it says there? Give a damn. Okay, no matter what it is, if it's something that impacts you and you're using, or some aspect of your life, give a damn. do something, get involved, right? The internet is critical to just about every sector in our entire world. So you should really care about it. And this is a way to get involved. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a lawyer. There's plenty of avenues and plenty of chances to have a voice. So it starts with, giving a damn. And you do that, I would recommend two things. One, organizations like this, other, local affinity groups or, local or regional ISOC chapters, to get out and talk and learn about the issues. A more, let's say, a more passive approach. Again, just learn, read. I'll recommend 3 books. One, Michael Kende, Kende, The Flip Side of Free. It's a great intro to, how internet is sort of structured from this sort of economic point of view. And let me tell you, if you want to learn anything, whether it's about a company or an organization, follow the money, how they're making it and where they're spending it. You'll learn so much about what you have to know. So that's a great book. The Internet in Everything by Laura Denardis, another great sense of, how all of this works. And then on the security front, that really gives you, it reads more like a Jean Le Carré spy novel from 20 years ago, but This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends by Nicole Perloff. Start reading, looking at the footnotes and endnotes and go from there. It'll help you sort of find the part of the internet that you're more passionate about and that you can give a damn.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think I've made my kind of position pretty clear. I believe that the internet is the cause and effect of politics. I think that politics structures the internet. I think the internet structures politics. I encourage young people to view internet governance issues as, the cause and the effect of any other issue that anyone you speak of cares about. Find those connections and use them for activist ends.
Awesome. Thank you guys both. So now we're going to transition into sort of a lightning round of questions for the last 5 to 10 minutes here. My first question to both of you is, how did you get involved in internet governance? For a lot of the people that this event is catered to, this is, one of their first experiences in understanding that there is a separate side to the background. What was your kind of first experience being involved in this community?
I stumbled into it. I always knew about internet governance, I guess, as long as I've understood kind of, 101 how the internet works. I was a postdoc and my postdoc advisor said, hey, people are talking about internet fragmentation, but I can't really find out if anyone's measured it. Can you measure it? And I kind of, found something different from what I expected. That kickstarted my interest in this area, but it was very happenstance that way.
Awesome. And Melinda?
So mine was, I got a job and, they said, I was in corporate development. They said, we want to go start this new business. There's this thing called ICANN. I'm like, you can what? I had no idea what any of these things were. So I learned who ICANN was and how the infrastructure system works. And as a strategy person, you can't function in this environment without factoring in the regulatory side of it. It's a huge part of any sort of planning and your environmental analysis because it directly impacts both the supply and demand side of your business.
Got it. My next question is, going forward at the IGF USA, is there a topic or group or session that you're most looking forward to?
Well, that's asking me to pick one of my 9 children. I really shouldn't do that. I think every one of them, everyone's done a really great job. And I think, you will come away with some new information and new perspectives on each of them.
I concur. Hard to pick. I am curious to hear the discussions about fragmentation because that's a particular interest area for me. I hope, to be involved with that, but, I cannot pick a favorite.
It's going to be interesting. I'm moderating that session, so I already know the questions.
Gotcha. Well, that's all I have for this session. I just wanted to briefly touch on and say thank you to both Melinda and Nick. You both are really amazing and interesting parts of this community. You represent very different sides with very different opinions. But I think what the youth advisors all really appreciate is your optimism and your interest in changing and bettering the internet going forward. I know that there was a lot of information to take away from here. I know that it ranged from very deep and very technical to very political topics, but we hope that everyone here could have taken away some small piece. This is just the first of the 3 sessions. The next session will be starting at the top of the next hour, so there will be a break. And we will be talking about the state of affairs at the IGF USA with various speakers and group leaders at the IGF. So please stay along. We're really excited to have you at the next session. Thank you so much to both Melinda and Nick for being here.
Thank you,
Thanks for
John.
having me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all.